I've been writing songs since I was 14 years old, but I've had a block for the last 30 years when it comes to music production. And I realised this wasn't just technical hesitation, this was full-blown DAWophobia. I decided to do this video today because I want to show other female independent artists that this emotional barrier is real and it can be dissolved. So to give you some context on my particular story, when I was a teenager about 30 years ago, I transitioned from one school to another, and I'd gone from what was called at the time GCSE music to A-level music. And when I arrived in what was called sixth form college to do my A-level music, I felt like I had somehow skipped a year because I had not been adequately prepared for the transition. And there were so many things that I didn't know that I felt all my classmates already did, or at least had enough of a foundation that they could pick it up. And I felt so behind. There were so many things that were either new to me or I had decided wasn't quite my thing, but I was kind of forced to do anyway. And when it came to the sort of music technical side of the A-level, I remember going into the studio that they had on site with a small group of other classmates and my male teacher telling me, so your project is going to be for the next 6 months, you're going to get time in the studio and you need to make a song of some kind. It could be anything. And that was all the instruction I got. Not what is a DAW and how to use it, not what is a music console and how to use it, what's EQ, what's compression, none of it. It was assumed knowledge at 16 years old. And I felt totally overwhelmed. And I know that music technology can be something that's scary for particularly women in general, but when you're not set up to succeed, it feels like you're drowning. And I struggled so much over that 6 months, and I remember coming into the studio when I had booked time and looking at all the knobs and the computer, and this was long before I had done my IT career, and just feeling like there was so much to learn and I wasn't capable of learning any of it. And this impression got ingrained deeper and deeper over the 6 months. And I procrastinated and procrastinated. It was almost like my worst time of the week when I had to go in the studio. And honestly, I completely failed to do the project because the stress levels were so much, in combination with a lot of other difficult stuff that was going on in my life, that I just did not have the resources to face what I was being asked to do without any instruction. And this was pre-internet, really. And so it's not like I could go on Google and or YouTube and find videos of what to do. I don't even recall them giving us a book to learn from. It was literally just, here's a computer, here's a console, figure it out. And we had to do this on our own. And it was too much for me. And this sort of imprinted this narrative in my mind of, I can't do music tech. And this stuck with me through my life. So what's interesting, after I dropped out of my music A-level and continued my life in other areas, just a few years later, I actually started in IT. I started learning how to program, doing web development, database administration, and so on. And so this was actually where I cut my teeth in learning that I'm actually technical. So I started building confidence and seeing that I do have the kind of mind that can grasp this. Some things I take to more naturally than others. And I may not class myself as like top of the class super geek, but I did very well. And I was able to show myself, not just at university, but also in my career, that I am capable of learning new technology and applying it quickly. And even though I decided to walk away from my IT career a few years ago, I still continued my technical knowledge because for 4 years I started teaching myself how to do video production, mostly for social media and for my music. But this was actually a really good transition and sort of in-between step for me to consider music technology, because there is some overlap between the two. And in terms of the way a DAW looks and a video production suite looks, there is some similarities as well. Obviously, they have different features because they're trying to accomplish different things, but there is something about it that gives it almost like a stepping stone that makes it easier to go towards a DAW. However, despite this, I still found that the idea of opening up a DAW and starting to put my music into it and starting to play around with all of those settings and plugins was completely overwhelming. And I realized that there was something going on here. There was a part of me, the rational side, that was able to say, look, you survived in IT for 22 years and you were successful. You did video production for 4 years. You should be able to pick up another piece of technology, another piece of software, and learn it. So there was this part of my mind that said, look, you have the confidence because you've proven yourself. But there was this other underlying emotional component that was overriding that. And it was like to the point where I couldn't even make sense of it to myself, because I was like, why is this such a big thing for me? And I think it's because this narrative of I'm not competent enough to do music technology got ingrained in me really early over a period of 6 months. And it just became this huge wound that just festered and was never properly addressed, because I wasn't ever in a position to actually face my fear and prove those negative thoughts wrong. So this unhealed emotional component had to be addressed first before I could really actually get into the learning process of music production. It was like clearing the ground so that I could actually do the work. So I would love to say there was this one magical thing that happened to me or that I did that suddenly transformed everything overnight, but that's not how emotional healing works. It's usually a very layered approach over time with multiple factors weighing in. But what I can say to you, how that happened for me. So one of the first steps was when one of my songwriting friends introduced me to Isabel Anderson, and she's known for encouraging and empowering female musicians to get into music production. And she's very much aware of the kind of blocks that I've just outlined and the kind of overwhelm that women can feel when they're trying to learn music production. And her particular outlook and the way that she framed things and the way she would break things down really worked for me. And the other thing that this highlighted to me was that I wasn't alone. I think for a long time I thought I was, or I just labeled myself as I'm not somebody who could do music technology. And so I didn't even consider myself as somebody who was just struggling with a negative mindset, and I was actually capable. So to actually learn that other women had overcome these blocks was huge for me by listening to her podcast. And then eventually I invested in her home recording academy course. So about a couple of weeks into the course, after I'd completed the bonus material and I had already done a couple of the modules, life kind of hit again. And I had to deal with the passing of somebody who had been in my life for a long time. And this completely threw me. And I had to kind of put all my plans out of the window. I wasn't in an emotional place to be able to face my music production fears and my DAW-ophobia and handle the grieving process. And so I had to prioritize what I could cope with, and I had to handle the grieving. And along the way, a number of other things sort of hit me, and it just became clear that it wasn't time for me to actually face this fear. And I believe greatly in the timing of things, because when it's the right time to face something, things just start to flow. And I am become convinced that this process I've gone through has been time coded, not only because I had to clear the emotional space so that I had the resources and resilience to face this block that I'd had for 30 years, but also because I honestly think if I had started out in the music industry when I was a teenager, the kind of experiences I might have had then might have actually been more devastating to me than trying to face this now. I think if I'd experienced any kind of setback, I was so on like a sort of emotional edge that it would have affected me deeply. And also, I wouldn't have had the life experience and confidence to handle the sort of ups and downs of the process. You know, now 30 years later, I have a lot more experience in handling life, and so I could handle these things. But the music industry is a much different thing now. Now there's so much more, even though it's hard as an independent musician, and there are so many ways in which I can get my music out now, and I can learn skills that wouldn't have been available to me as a teenager. And so I feel that this was actually something that had to unfold at a very specific time so that I could take advantage of the positive benefits of being in the music industry now. And so there is something to be said about giving yourself permission to do it at the right time, to know when it is the right time for you and when you're forcing it. So it's okay if life takes you in different directions. It's okay if you even let go of the idea of doing this, because if it's truly meant for you and your path, it's going to come back to you. So there's a need to trust that. And if you can, then you can allow yourself to work at your pace and your timing. And when it is time, it's going to flow much more easier. And one of the other things was, as I started getting closer to the right time, I started to find that I got more excited about the possibilities than being focused on the fear. I remember very recently, just a few weeks ago, waking up one day and just having this feeling of, this is something that's possible for me. It was like this block was starting to dissolve very naturally, organically on its own. I didn't have to force it. It was just like, because it was becoming more time, it was almost like the layers of it were starting to peel away. And it had peeled away enough, naturally, that I woke up one day and thought, wow, this is actually possible for me. And I hadn't even been doing very much prior to that led me to sort of like think, well, oh, that's why I'm thinking that today. It was just like the emotional block was starting to dissolve because I've been working on myself. I've been healing myself. I've been dealing with the grieving. I've been doing a lot of emotional work just in general in my life. I had been thinking a lot about my future and what I want to do going forward, and really putting myself first in my life and my healing first. And when you prioritize your healing, it's like it impacts every area of your life. And of course, in my case with the music technology, I had an emotional block. And so in working on healing myself, it naturally fed into the process of dissolving this block that I had around music technology, as well as improving multiple areas of my life. So learning to focus on yourself, self-development, healing, doing what's right for you. Sometimes that can just lay the foundation so that when it is time, that seed's going to grow in fertile soil. So I feel that there was this really sort of holistic approach that was going on to my healing that naturally led me to be able to face that. And the final sort of push, although I was already there myself, I was already feeling like it's time, was that the course that I had enrolled on was actually going to be taken down, and so there was a window to actually get it done whilst the course was live, rather than having to just go through files on my computer. And when that happened, I realized this felt like a nudge from the universe for me to actually do it now, prioritize it now. And so I did. And I feel that listening to these nudges for when it's time and when it's not is key to figuring out when it's time to face your music technology blocks. So as you can tell, this wasn't just about learning new technical skills, this was about healing the emotional disconnect. And once that happened, it was like things started to open up. So recording myself became my way of reclaiming control over my art. But it hasn't been easy, because in working my way through this course and actually starting to open up a door, I've had to face all of those little niggling concerns and all of those things that made me feel overwhelmed. Like there's so much to learn, and like there's so many different dials and knobs and settings and lots of different plugins, and each one of those has their own settings, and there's so much that you feel like you don't know. And one of the primary examples of that has been that I've not worked really with compression before this course, but whenever I've opened up a compressor, I've seen all these dials and I'm like, I don't understand what they do, so I don't know how to get it to work for me. And I didn't even necessarily understand the fundamentals of it. And so being able to actually sort of finally plug in the gaps in the knowledge so that I can actually feel like I can take a breath, I actually have a foundation in this now, was key. But it's also like being able to break down things into small chunks when I'm actually doing the work. So I found, for example, recently I opened up my door and I imported some stems, and just the little act of organizing it and defining some regions and even just setting the initial volume levels so that it sounded like okay to my ears as I was playing it back, just doing those small introductory steps actually gave me a lot of confidence, because I was able to show myself, look, I'm actually doing it. Look, I've actually got the door open and I am making small concrete steps towards my goal. And this is really the best way to deal with overwhelm, is to actually just chunk it up, break it down into the smallest thing and achieve something so that you can actually feel like you're making progress, rather than constantly keeping the whole map in your mind of everything you know you don't know. In just making the tiniest of steps, I'm finding that I'm gaining so much more confidence, because just a small amount of improvement is such a big step for me. And so I'm already feeling, as I'm teetering on the edge of stepping into new territory in my course, going beyond anything that I've ever attempted to do in the past, even though there is that little initial bit of fear of, oh, I'm about to learn something new and can I do it? Because I've been making these little micro steps and achievements, I'm already starting to see my confidence build. And this is really another way to dissolve whatever is still lingering in me, as my mind is like reframing and remapping itself to understand that, yes, I can do music technology and I can become a music producer. So I'm genuinely curious, and I would like to hear from you. After watching this, what were your music tech blocks and how did you start to overcome them? Drop your story in the comments below.